Hello and welcome. This is Patrick Jaguar, the Cosmic Alchemist, and welcome to this video. So it's been a while. June's been a crazy month. I actually moved. Didn't have a lot of time to do this. I shot a video, didn't like it, didn't redo it. So for those of you that follow me, it's been an irregular month. I like to make 1-2 videos a month, but I'll be back on course pretty soon here, back to the normal. So in this video I really want to just it's kind of a closing video for June. It's been a crazy one. I'm going to talk mostly about the eclipse and some conjunctions, some alignments taking place in the last days of the month here. I'm doing this on the 27th, but just to kind of put things in perspective, I've even had people email me and they said, hey, are you still making videos or what? I'd like to hear something new from you. So I want to start basically, the big thing to realize here is with this eclipse that happened on the summer solstice on Midsummer's Day, so on the 21st of June, there was a solar eclipse in Gemini. So one thing to be mindful of is Gemini is opposite from Sagittarius, and Sagittarius was where the December solar eclipse happened, December 26th. And that was in the low degrees of Sagittarius. I want to say around 6 or 8 degrees of Sagittarius. So that's right at galactic center, because the nakshatra Mula is there. So anytime something aligns with galactic center, you're getting a download from the universe and really from the divine too, because the spirit world and the physical world, they line up and they have correspondences and they coexist. So galactic center is full of black holes and giant stars, and there's a lot of radiation coming out of there. And when you get into the old Gnostic writings and their whole cosmology and their mythology, they talk about the aeons. They were immortal spiritual beings who actually built this 3D universe. The two who figure prominently into the Gnostic creation story are Christos and Sophia. So Christos is where we get this word Christ, and then Sophia, means wisdom. So that's where those two names come from. So, people think that the word Christ was identified when Jesus came along. It wasn't. It was a title that this historical figure who the whole Jesus story is about, he actually took on this title, Christos, because he was part of a Gnostic Jewish community, kind of part Greek, part Jewish. But that's an old word. So anyway, Christos and Sophia, those were these aeons that figured into the Gnostics' vision of how the universe was created. And they said that these beings reside at galactic center. So point is when conjunctions happen at galactic center, when planets line up with it, big things happen. We get downloads. It changes the world. It changes consciousness. It's a big deal. So we had June 21st, we had the eclipse opposite to galactic center. So, if you go back to December 26th, that solar eclipse in Sagittarius, Sagittarius is, a lot of people say Sagittarius is about the truth. I disagree with that in part because I don't believe in the truth, because people argue for days and days about what the truth is, and there is no the truth. You can come to a consensus, but really it's always subjective, and it's always based on, it's largely based on what people want to hear. They have their prejudices and they have their views of how things are and how things work and how things are supposed to be, and that's how they arrive at what the truth is. So, and you do have to have standards, and you do have to have really laws and codes of behavior, but this whole thing about the truth that people get so crazy about, it doesn't exist. So Sagittarius really isn't about the truth, but it's about our individual, or the collectives we choose to associate with. It's about our individual or collective hypotheses of the truth. So hypothesis is an important word here, because Sagittarius is all about philosophies, higher learnings. It's about spirituality, religion. And what all those things have in common is they never totally reach the truth, no matter how deep your spirituality or your philosophy is, or how educated you are, how educated you think you are, how intelligent you believe yourself to be. You never get to the truth. And that's in the Tao Te Ching. That's one of the first concepts that's discussed, and Lao Tzu, or whoever wrote that thing, says the way that can be discussed is not the way. So the idea is that if you can, anything that you can think up and tell to people about how the world works, how God works, how people work, how anything works, and you try to make this broad statement and you want to have the final word on that, it's impossible, because as humans we're very intelligent, and we are equal to the gods and to goddesses and to God, and we are equal with the divine because we are divine. We're spirits that are attached to these bodies having this experience. But when you come here as a spirit to have this physical experience, something gets lost in translation. So you lose the omnipotence and omniscience, the all-knowing, all-presence, all power of your spirit. And we take on this limited human configuration, if you want to call it that. So the point is, with all that, is you're never going to reach to the truth. You can come closer to it by degrees, but you're never going to be there. So people need to lighten the fuck up about this whole fighting about the truth, and I have the truth and you don't have the truth. You're never going to reach it. But what you can do is you can strive to it and keep your mind open for new inputs and new information that'll readjust you and get you another degree closer to the truth. That's the best you're ever going to do. So deal with it and enjoy it. Embrace it. And and that's a big thing that's going on right now, is we're facing our control issues, or we're getting challenged to face our control issues. Not everyone is embracing that. Many people are choosing to go deeper into their control issues and think they can control everything, or they can jump on a bandwagon that does control everything and that does have all the answers. But that's a fiction. That's impossible. And that's, this whole COVID thing is really pointing that out to us. And even, even some of the social justice stuff that's going on, With COVID, there's a disease, but the fatality is like 0.1%. It's people who have diabetes, lung problems, obesity, people who are very old. They're the ones who are dying from it. It's not an equal opportunity disease. So have some courage. And courage is not just voting for the correct political party and jumping on Facebook bandwagons and shaming people and talking shit about people. It's about being in your integrity, just living your life to make yourself happy, and not worrying about what other people think of you. And it's about doing that and not compromising because you caved into peer pressure. You do have to be socially responsible. You can't, being yourself and living to make yourself happy doesn't involve exploiting or hurting other people. It never does. But that's what courage is it's being yourself and not being afraid to be yourself and not cowering in fear over what other people are going to think of you. So, for the most part, in this country, in this world right now, we're failing at that, and we got to work on that. So, anyway, about these eclipses. So, the one in December, Sagittarius, it's about us being presented with the illusion that we have the truth, that our hypothesis of the truth is absolutely correct. So, we had to come face to face with that, and some people chose to keep their minds open and readjust their worldview. A lot of people didn't. So now we're back opposite to that, and we just had the solar eclipse in Gemini. So Gemini's Mercury ruled. It's about communication, but it's about the details and the facts, and it's about communicating those. And so the thing is when your mind is not open and you think that your hypothesis of the truth or your political party's view of it or whatever bandwagon that makes you feel complete, when you think your hypothesis of the truth is absolutely correct and everybody else is wrong, then you don't have your facts straight. There are a lot of facts out there in the world that you will refuse to see. And ironically, that's what everybody's talking about. Everyone is bitching about the facts, and they have the facts, and this other side doesn't have the facts, and you hear, we follow science and you don't. We keep hearing stuff like this. And it's crazy too, because really, like, COVID it's the left of the Democratic Party's 9/11. So people on the left are acting just like people on the right did after 9/11. It's their turn to be self-righteous know-it-alls and to feel like they're American heroes because they're being led by their fear into basically a constricted space. In the heat of the summer, you got to wear a muzzle. You got to wear your muzzle burqa, hiding your face in the heat of the summer. So it's just like 9/11. We're getting corralled into more and more confinement. So, and what's contributing to this is people don't want to see. There are facts that they choose not to see because they think they have everything figured out. So they think they have a flawless hypothesis of the truth. So, we really need to. We need to wake up in a lot of ways, and I'm not saying this because I think I have the whole truth and I've got to figure it out. I just have the wherewithal to know that we're constantly getting manipulated because that's the easiest way to rule thousands and millions and billions of people is to keep them scared. And really, the people who run the world, it's all the attention-seeking pains in the ass from student council. Now they have law degrees and they get elected for a public office. So it's like, do you really want these people to lead you and manage every aspect of your life? So, a lot of freaks and fools in that trade. Really, they all are. So anyway, let's look at this eclipse that we just had. Some of the details of this. So it was a solar eclipse at 4 degrees Gemini. So when we look at nakshatras, and if you're not familiar with nakshatras are the 27 mini constellations that make up the 12 signs of the zodiac. So there's smaller constellations that work behind the scenes of the 12 signs. So this 4 degrees of Gemini, where the eclipse happened, was in a nakshatra called Mrigashira. And Mrigashira it's all about sort of the search, like the search for a cure, because the Rahu and Ketu, the north and south nodes of the moon, they move backwards through the signs and through the constellations rather than in the usual forward order like the rest of the planets. So Ardra comes after Mrigashira, but since Rahu and Ketu, the north and south nodes, move backwards, they go through them in reverse order. So Rahu is just in Ardra. Ardra is the symbolized by the teardrops, the howling winds, so tragic events. And Ardra and Rahu can often they can herald the occurrence of infectious diseases and pandemics. So, but then Rahu moves on to Mrigashira. So Mrigashira is all about the search for the cure, and it's all about finding the cure. And Mrigashira is symbolized by the elixir of immortality and the elixir of life, whereas Ardra, where Rahu just transited from, was the poison. So we're going to find the cure here. That's one of the big things with Rahu being here. So people talk about how COVID's going to be here forever. It's not. Maybe in trace amounts, but this whole thing about how we're going to have to wear our burqas and our muzzles indefinitely, and we're not going to be able to go socialize with people indefinitely, that's bullshit. Those are people selling you the fear. They want you to think that because it's easier to rule people when they're in a state of fear. So anyway, 4 degrees of Gemini. This was a Rahu eclipse. So Rahu is the trickster, the illusionist. Rahu wants things so bad that he's kind of gullible, and he falls into his own ego traps because he sees something and he projects what he wants onto that situation. So we had the sun conjunct with Rahu for this eclipse. So Rahu is the master of illusions, the trickster. And so when you have the solar eclipse here with Rahu and Gemini, this projects all kinds of illusions onto the facts. And like I said, people see the facts they want to, and they don't see the facts they don't want to, because they have a bias that they can't shake, but they're so self-righteous in their beliefs and their hypothesis of the truth, Sagittarius, that they refuse to see facts that don't fit their prejudices and their preconceived notions. So the solar eclipse really highlights that, how we're not seeing the facts clearly. And one thing I want to point out here is that this 4 degrees of Gemini, this is where Beetlejuice is. So I'm not talking about Michael Keaton Beetlejuice, great movie, but I'm talking about the star Beetlejuice. So Beetlejuice is this giant, massive red giant star. I think it's considered to be a dying star. It's part of Orion. It's the shoulder of Orion where he's, swinging his club, Orion the hunter. So, and that's interesting too, because Betelgeuse being a dying star, a decaying star that's eventually going to collapse. That's fascinating to me because, Gemini one thing it deals with is mass media and communication. And, we see our mass media system crumbling. New television news ratings are way the hell down. All networks, I don't take a side with Fox, CNN, MSNBC, blah, 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 bullshit. It's all crap. They all have an agenda. They're all for-profit businesses, and their sponsors, who pay them billions of dollars to run commercials, lay conditions down. They want them to tell the news a certain way. Weapons companies sponsor news networks, pharmaceutical companies, so 9/11. Weapons companies had a windfall because we went into a 20-year war. That was a debacle. We gained and won nothing. And now we've got the left-wing 9/11, so the pharmaceutical companies are going to have a windfall just like the defense ones did after 2000. So, we gotta be mindful here because So not only is Betelgeuse this dying star, and it's representing this, this crumbling news media industry, and even Hollywood. Hollywood is part of the news media. They all run propaganda. Hollywood's collapsing too. Before COVID, they were making crappy movies and just running sequels, and everybody was making fun of it. So comedians were all over it making fun of it. So it's all collapsing. But another thing with Betelgeuse here is I looked at different traditions and how they represent and symbolize Betelgeuse, and I found with the Zulus in southern Africa, they look at Betelgeuse as a stalking lion, so a lion like stalking in the grass. Lions kind of have that they're like reddish gold, and Betelgeuse is a red star, so I can see why they made this association. So Betelgeuse, this red star, this stalking lion, this shoulder of Orion, the Zulus saw Betelgeuse as stalking the 3 stars of Orion's belt, who they saw as zebras. So, what you have here with Betelgeuse is the Zulus put this sort of predatory connotation onto Betelgeuse. They associated Betelgeuse with this kind of predatory energy. So this is definitely going on in the world right now. It's all political sides. They're all trying to scare you so that you get onto their program. I'm not saying Donald Trump's not trying to do this. Fear is his friend too. But fear is a huge friend of the Democrats and any of their leaders too, or any left-wing person or any right-wing person. It's all the same. When you look at left and right-wing politics, it's the old church in the aristocracy, or church in the aristocracy from medieval times. So the right is they're like the aristocrats, and the left is the church. And it's funny because a lot of people on the left right now, they're calling people who don't want to wear face masks non-believers. And that's what religious fundamentalists from ancient times up to this day have always accused people of before they kill them for not being part of their religion. Christians and Muslims still do it. So, or just fundamentalists of any religion still do it. So it's this age-old thing we're dealing with. So if you think you're smart because you belong to a certain party, or you have all kinds of education, and you like to laugh at religious people, well, you're a religious person too, because you're still in that old mindset. We've cast off these old institutions, but we still have this desire for blind faith. We feel like blind faith in something makes us safe. So we're being preyed upon. So this Sun in Rahu creating this eclipse at 4 degrees of Gemini on top of Betelgeuse, it's about these predatory forces, these predatory energies behind the scenes that are using communication and mass media. Even though it's a dying system, they're using it to scare us so that we follow them blindly. So, and even though that this is happening in Mrigashira, the constellation of the cure, what happens often when Rahu goes into Mrigashira is that we get offered a cure based on lies. So if we go back in history a little bit, we go back to right after 2001, right after 9/11, Rahu was in Ardra, the poison, the teardrops, the howling winds, the tragedy constellation during 9/11. But then in 2002, it shifted to Mrigashira, which was the cure and searching for the cure and the elixir of life. But people will tell you that whenever Rahu goes here, we get brought together and we get healed, and I've heard some New Age stuff about this, and well, yeah, that's true on one level, but at the same time, we get a cure that's based on lies. So after 9/11, we get the Patriot Act. which was based on lies, and it just took away our privacy and our civil rights and our civil liberties. And so, yeah, we were cured, you might say that. The terrorist boogeymen went away and we got made safe from them, supposedly. But our quality of life was diminished. And then, last time Rahu was in Ardra, went to Mrigashira, that was at the end of the 80s. The beginning of the 80s, 83, when AIDS was acknowledged as being a disease. Didn't have that effect for most people, but when I talk to friends of mine who are gay men who were in their 20s and 30s when AIDS came out, it was a very scary time, and these are the people who they actually have no love for Dr. Fauci because they feel he dragged his feet a lot, and he wanted to get credit for the discoveries, and he was really playing politics through the whole thing. So they feel like that even though AIDS was acknowledged as being a real thing, and people with AIDS started to get acknowledgement and more rights, they feel like they got done wrong, and actually done wrong by Dr. Fauci and the authority that was vested in him even back then, almost 40 years ago. So then you go back before that, you go back to about 1964-65. This was right after JFK died, and the United States faked the Gulf of Tonkin incident. It was a false flag operation. They got us involved in Vietnam. And then the United States sent more troops to Vietnam, and we had this 10-year war that was a total disaster. 60,000 Americans died. Something like 2 million Vietnamese people died. It was a disaster. So we got healed and brought together after JFK got shot, but it was based on lies, and it was pretty disastrous cure. Then you go back from that. You go back another 18 and a half years. You get to 1945, moving forward from there into 1947. 1945, when Rahu was in Ardra, again, the poison, the teardrops, the howling wind, you get the bombs, atom bombs dropped on Japan. And then after that, World War II ends. And then we get healed and brought together, but then we get the Cold War, we get the National Security Act. And the National Security Act was where the United States, to combat the threat of communism in the Soviet Union and Red China, set up a police state, set up CIA and NSA, and gave FBI and law enforcement all these powers to wiretap and infringe on people's privacy. They actually started tracking people's library cards, what books they were checking out, so they weren't, in case they were reading about communism. So, what we did with this National Security Act was we used Nazi war criminals from Nazi intelligence who were given war crimes immunity to start CIA and NSA. They were actually half of the founding members in each of those agencies. So our being cured and brought together after World War II was actually this police state trap. And we had this whole Cold War, which it wasn't about communism, it was about money, and it was about resources, and it was a fight over those. And basically China and the Soviet Union, who fought 95% of World War II, were expected to basically crawl on their knees to the US and Britain, who fought about 5% of the war. And at the Bretton Woods Agreement, it was set up where the US and Britain would have the most valuable currencies in the world and have the leading economies. So, you have to watch out. Even though when Rahu moves from Ardra to Mrigashira, yeah, you're on the way to a cure, but it might not be the cure you're expecting, and it might not be a cure that treats things to the root of the problem. Because in all of these historical instances that I've just pointed out, it's just kind of plastered over. You can even if you go back to 1929, the cure after that, was basically the New Deal. And, people think, They look at FDR like some kind of a saint. And in school, we're taught that the New Deal came from taxing the rich, and they got all this money to have all these social programs and public works projects. He didn't do that by taxing the rich. FDR went to Harvard. He was a member of the Delano dynasty. They were Boston Brahmins who made their fortunes during the Opium Wars by shipping opium into China. And when the Chinese tried to ban opium, they had the British Navy bombard the coastal cities in China. So that's how the money that FDR went to Harvard on was dirty opium money. So with the New Deal, he had his Harvard buddies who ran Wall Street put money into public works projects because there wasn't a lack of money during the Depression. It's just that wealthy individuals and banks and institutions didn't want to invest the money, so that's why the economy dried up and people lost their jobs. So FDR and his cabinet and the members of Congress that were working with him put together public works projects as investment programs, and they told wealthy institutions and individuals, invest in these programs and we're going to guarantee you a return on your money. We'll guarantee you at least this much return on your money. So then they are under pressure because they needed to pay back this money with interest. And that's why U.S. neutrality was broken in World War II. We didn't go into World War II for social justice reasons because of the Holocaust or because Hitler was a bad guy and he was invading his neighbors. We did it because we needed to pay back all these wealthy individuals and these banks. And so we needed to go grab some resources overseas, and we needed to reshape the global economy to put the US dollar on top to create an economic windfall. So you got to be careful about the whole point. You have to be careful about the cure that is being sold to you because it's not always what you think it is. So, switching subjects about this eclipse, I want to look at the path of the eclipse here. So, this eclipse, it was visible on the path in this graphic, and so it was visible in the Horn of Africa, southern Arabia, you're talking about Yemen and Oman, and then northern India and China. So the interesting thing about this eclipse path is that it went right over the border between India and China, where there's a border dispute going on. And so, as everyone's fighting about, they're having their riots, and they're wearing their muzzles in the middle of the summer, and they're bickering about what the science says about COVID and about the social justice, and they're stroking themselves out about Donald Trump. As all this is happening, you get two nuclear powers, India and China, who are having a border dispute. And they're, in the last couple of weeks, the soldiers that were guarding this border, actually, they put down their guns and they had, a hand-to-hand brawl. And the Chinese threw like a dozen Indian soldiers into a gorge, because this is a mountainous region in the Himalayas. So, this is something that, the news thinks it's so fair and unbiased and so intellectual and sophisticated. They should be talking about two nuclear powers who are having a border dispute and who might go to war. And here's the thing. The Himalayas are full of rare earth minerals that they make cell phone components out of, and components for circuitry. So, and it's full of lithium too. An interesting thing with the lithium is all these electric cars that people get very snooty about driving because they save the earth. Well, these giant environmental disasters are being created with these lithium mines, and they're just as filthy. And because it hasn't been going on for as long as the oil industry, they may be filthier than the oil industry itself and the environmental toll that it takes. So Tibet, and all the trendies in San Francisco and Boulder and Cambridge, Mass, and Santa Fe, they all display their free Tibet banners. Well, they all own a MacBook, an iPhone, and an iPad. And so basically Tibet is getting torn up by Chinese companies, getting cratered with open pit mines to dig up this lithium so you can drive your Tesla and have your Mac, your Apple devices. So, the world is ironic. God's language is irony. So that's what this border dispute is about, is these mountains are full of minerals. And both countries want them. Well, I should say the corporations that puppeteer the governments in China and India want these minerals, so they're using the corporate security, the national militaries, to secure this territory. So when an eclipse goes over a place, when an eclipse is visible from a place, that's where things tend to happen. And this happened back this last solar eclipse, December 26th, the one in Sagittarius I was talking about earlier. That was visible in China, and then within a couple of weeks you get the news of this COVID, coronavirus, kung flu outbreak, whatever you want to call it. So the wherever the solar eclipse is visible, things happen. So let me get the name of the area too, where this border dispute's going on. I didn't write down the name of the valley here. Give me a second. The Galwan Valley. So it's the Galwan Valley between Tibet and India, Chinese-controlled Tibet. This is the area, incidentally, where CIA actually rescued the Dalai Lama from the Chinese back in the 1950s. I think it was 1959. The little incidental. The Green Berets trained a bunch of Tibetan exiles at a place called Camp Hale in Colorado. It's now known as the Vail Ski Resort. It was Camp Hale back then. It was an army base in Vail, Colorado. So the Green Berets, the Army Special Forces, trained Tibetan exiles. Then they all parachuted in. The Green Berets, as advisors, parachuted in with these trained Tibetans, and they rescued the Dalai Lama from his palace as the Chinese army was advancing, and they walked him into India, where he now lives. So they walked him through this area. So that's kind of interesting. Most people don't know that about the Dalai Lama. So Dalai Lama actually owes his life to Central Intelligence. So that's why over the years he does these anti-China, he makes these statements. Of course, he's a native Tibetan. China's oppressing Tibet, but he's kind of like an entertainer who has a contract with a Vegas casino. He has to perform so many times a year. So, Dalai Lama is a very useful kind of a media tool. So anyway, less so, as corporations and politicians who are sponsored by these corporations in the U.S. have gotten, more buddy-buddy with China. But that's kind of the story with the Dalai Lama. So anyway, the Galwan Valley. So keep your eyes on that. There's a window of time. I would say, anytime within the next 6 months, something could go off. Mars is going to retrograde very soon, so I could see something happening then. We'll get into Mars a little bit later here. So, another thing too on Eclipse Day, June 21st, a few days ago, Jupiter and Pluto were conjunct the 0 degrees of Capricorn. So, Jupiter and Pluto conjunct, last time that happened was December of 2007. So that was what hailed, it was the forerunner of the 2008 stock market crash. Bear Stearns, Lehman Brothers, the whole bit. And interestingly, when you do the astrocartography about, where are these planets basically overhead, on Eclipse Day, Jupiter and Pluto were right overhead of New York. So in the next several months, we're going to see another stock market drama, another upset, another crash. So, the big thing here with Pluto, to bear in mind is, Pluto is all about death and rebirth. Pluto it's about new beginnings, but you have to have an ending before you can have a new beginning. Interesting thing is that last time, I mentioned Pluto and Jupiter met up in 2007. I was in Sagittarius. And that was when, Jupiter in Sagittarius is in its home sign. So it has a lot of power. Planets have a lot of power in their home signs. So, the market bounced back quickly. They got that bailout from We the People. These investment banks got what? $700 billion. They got a reward for failing. So they were able to sort of spackle over the damage, the decay in the economy, and things sort of rolled along merrily, to one degree or another, depending on your situation. And the news has portrayed it like that we made a recovery, but, we're making the money we made in 1999. So the economy was never really fixed. So now you get this Jupiter and Pluto are together, conjunct in Capricorn. So Jupiter doesn't have all the power in Capricorn that it does in Sagittarius, because Sagittarius is a very anything goes kind of a sign. Jupiter is expansive and it's optimistic and it wants to be all-inclusive. But now it's in Saturn's house, it's in Capricorn. It's going to retrograde to Sagittarius, but Jupiter and Pluto met up in Capricorn. Or I should say, let me see. Yeah, they're going to meet up again in, they did it on the 21st. They're going to do it again in a few days on the 29th. Then they'll meet up again in the Capricorn on November 12th. So, and then there was one on April 5th. So 4 Jupiter-Pluto conjunctions, which is unprecedented in our lifetime. So Jupiter doesn't have its home field advantage in Capricorn. So Jupiter's desire to just expand and not worry about the details and just take on this project and that project and do this and do that, it's going to get curtailed. And Jupiter represents banking. So banking is going to get a reality check and it's going to get a haircut, and it's had a reality check coming for years, because especially when you look at derivatives, this whole derivatives market, it's a bet. Like stocks are a bet on how something's going to perform. Derivatives are bets on bets. So you bet on how a stock, which is a bet, is going to perform, and that it's worth more than 100 times of what this derivatives market is worth, more than 100 times of what the actual global economy is worth. And this is propping up everyone's pension funds and retirement funds. So there's going to be some serious shit here. We're going to, in this decade, we're going to have a depression. You might get all frightened to hear that, but nothing I can do about that. That's just the way it is. So, and there's other things too here. When you get Pluto and Capricorn, you get kind of some tyrannical, and even some kind of like coercive, kind of mafioso kind of energy going on here. So, we're already seeing that, and we'll see a little more of that. So we'll see how this goes. But I have to point out that the last December 21st eclipse was in 2001. Solar eclipse was in 2001, and there was a lot of tyrannical, sneaky kind of mafioso energy going on then too. So people are talking about air travel starting back up. It's not going to be the way it was, and the medical screening you're going to have to probably go through for air travel is going to be like getting screened to be an astronaut practically. So honestly, be ready to push back, because we're just going to keep getting pushed into a corner if we go along with it. Now, another thing too, with Jupiter and Pluto conjunct in Capricorn, you're going to get secrets coming out of the dark, because Pluto, it deals with this death and rebirth, but it also, Pluto's a god of the underworld, so it deals with things that go on beyond the light of day, things that go on under the surface and behind the scenes and in the dark. So conspiratorial activity and shady, underhand activity pertain to Pluto. So, and then, Jupiter is the higher consciousness. So when you get these two together, in Capricorn, the sign of government, secrets come out of the dark, and disclosures happen. So, no matter who you are, we're going to start seeing that your favorite politicians that you think are going to save the day for you are not who you thought they were. And we're also seeing too, especially with this Mercury retrograde, that happened on June 18th. We've seen an uptick in the COVID. But it doesn't mean COVID's getting worse. It just means that we're testing, because they made these millions of tests. What was Trumpy had his Operation Warp Speed or whatever, and they got all these ventilators and test kits ready. So the media is painting COVID like it's getting worse just because people are testing more. And it's like, honestly, I think about 90% of people have had COVID, but they're either asymptomatic or it has no effect on them because they have a healthy immune system. So this isn't a real uptick in COVID. It's just the whole thing's getting basically spun out of proportion, and your fears are being played upon because people will watch the news more when they're afraid. So, it's not brain surgery. So, and then kind of moving on from the eclipse, I've said so much about that. June 25th, a couple of days ago, Venus ended her retrograde at 11 degrees of Taurus. So Venus is now the morning star. Venus had this inferior conjunction to the sun. Inferior conjunction just means when a planet that is nearer to the sun than the Earth, it comes between the Earth and the sun. Passes between. So when this happens, Venus goes from the evening star to the morning star. So Venus is now the morning star. And, Venus is going to, the morning star is the light bringer. And so this is, you hear about Lucifer. Christians talk about Lucifer. And, Lucifer's evil and da-da-da. Lucifer's Satan. No. Lucifer means the light bringer. Lucifer is the planet Venus, and she's the morning star. Because the morning star rises before the sun, and it's the last star visible in the sky. As the sky is illuminating and the other stars disappear, you can still see the planet Venus. So Venus heralds the dawn. It brings the light. So it's Lucifer, the light bringer. So, Venus just did this retrograde and in Taurus, in her home sign. So, Venus is the human planet, they call her. the planet that is most sympathetic to the human condition, most empathetic. So, Venus will bring a new dawn here. And this involves, really embracing the divine feminine and restoring it to its rightful place, where it's been in this Roman Judeo-Christian world that we've been in for the last 1700 years. It's been very subjugated. So it's all about restoring it to its place in rightful balance with divine masculine. It's also about respecting nature, not just the physical environment, but respecting the natural environment of our own bodies. So, along with the Jupiter K2 conjunction that we had, that heralds, scientific breakthroughs, you're going to get some, in breakthroughs in medicine, you're going to get some of these breakthroughs in medicine, I think, through Venus, that's just come out of retrograde in her home sign. She's spending something like 4 to 5 months in Taurus this year. So that's a lot of healing and a lot of revaluation for the better. And then also on June 25th, we had Neptune go into retrograde at 26 degrees of Aquarius. So, Neptune is a planet that deals with delusions. Neptune can either help us lead ourselves into delusions, or Neptune can basically disclose, really dark, hidden truths, and hidden agendas and lies. Neptune goes forward. Neptune sort of allows us to, lead ourselves into delusion and, chasing illusions. When Neptune goes retrograde, it sort of starts throwing the truths out there and points out the hidden agendas and things like that. An interesting thing about Neptune being here at 26 degrees of Aquarius, this is where Neptune was in 1856. And 1856 was a crucial year leading up to the Civil War. You look up a term called Bleeding Kansas. That was basically Kansas wanted to be a free state, and you had these people there called the Free Soilers, but then there were people who wanted Kansas to be a slave state, and they were trying to force that to happen, and there was a bunch of violence. So that was really a precipitating event leading up to the Civil War of 1861. I'm talking about the American Civil War here. So we are kind of in 1856, and I think eventually we'll see the United States break up. I'm going to make another video about this, but I think, and I haven't originated this, other people have been talking about this for a long time, but I've done my own research. I've thought the United States was going to break up for probably the last 15 years. I started getting into the research of some Russian intelligence analysts back from the 1990s, and they said that by about 2030, the United States would break into about half a dozen different countries. I thought that made a lot of sense. Now I have the astrology to basically to put to what I've understood intellectually and intuitively, just through learning about economics and government and intelligence community and all that. So what I think you're going to see is the blue states, or a lot of blue states, are going to secede from the Union. And the interesting thing was, the South during the Civil War days was the Democratic Party back then. The Democratic Party back then was the party of the KKK and slavery and all that. So, and then the parties kind of went through their changes, and they sort of switched demographics, and because back in the 1800s and really through the 1960s, the Republican Party was actually the intellectual party and the progressive party, and then things kind of switched. So I think you're going to see like the West Coast states and the northern states actually pull away from the federal government in the next several years. So we're in the beginning stages of that. Now, the last thing I want to talk about here in June, well, one of the last things, both from June 29th to June 30th, over those 2 days, both Jupiter and Pluto are going to retrograde back into Sagittarius. So they're going to go back to Jupiter's home sign, the sign of the truth, or your hypothesis of the truth that you can best figure. There's nothing wrong with having your hypothesis of the truth, as long as you have an open mind and you will accept new information, and as long as you will accept or you will entertain the views and the insights of people who don't belong to your political party and your bandwagons, whatever those are for you. Because, a mind is like a parachute, only works when it's open. So they're going back to Sagittarius, which deals with all that. So they were together in government, and they're helping to show us things that were going on in government, and they're almost sort of helping to kind of curtail, the kind of overreaching power of government. So now they go back to Sagittarius. We're going to have to basically, well, we don't have to, you don't have to do anything, but we're going to be challenged to reevaluate our hypothesis of the truth and how everything works. Some people are going to double down on their dogmas and they're not going to want to change, and they're not going to want to see things in new ways. And they're just going to insist on clinging to their tired old worldviews that they learned decades ago, that they learned in civics class in the 1950s or 60s, or that they learned in college in the 1990s or whatever. So the challenge here will be to, change your knowledge and your higher consciousness, Jupiter. The challenge will be to put old, outdated views to rest and, entertain new views and see if they work for you. And really, put your life on a more genuine path. So that'll be the challenge. A door has to close for a new one to open. So, it's all about how are you going to roll with these punches and embrace these changes. It's all up to you. But, don't just think you can make a better world just by watching the news and voting for the correct party and, regurgitating what you hear on the right news network. Because it's not that easy. Because when everything is neatly packaged for you and spoon-fed into sound bites and nice little articles and editorials, it's not the whole truth. It's what the corporate sponsors want the stories to look like and want them to be told like. So, one of the big things we're dealing with here is complacence. People think, well, I was in the military and I own a business, I own a home, I raise children. Of course, media and government tell me the truth because I've made something of my life. They don't care. They really don't care about what you've done because they have their own agendas. They're trying to make billions of dollars, and you're just a stepping stone on that agenda. So take yourself down, take your ego down a peg, and realize that nobody's going to just hand you the truth because you made something of your life. Because people who basically own governments, who control corporations, who control governments, people who own castles, who own private islands, who own oil tankers, they don't care that you went to college and served in the military and you make your little salary or you run your little business. They don't, you pay your mortgage, they don't care. They're doing what they want to do, and media is there to help them get their way because they fund the media to tell the stories the way they want them to be told. So, get with it. I'm not saying I have the whole truth. I just know that People in power lie because they've always lied and they always will lie. And you're not going to legislate that out of existence because people who make laws always need money to run for office. So, that's enough of that. So, this eclipse in this month of June, consciousness is definitely expanding, and it'll be on the expansion for this whole decade, but we have to put our old worldview to rest. We have to bury it. We have to put it to rest. And the last thing really I want to talk about is that, we're really getting led around by our dark fantasies, our paranoid fantasies. And we have this idea that if everyone doesn't wear a face mask, or if everyone doesn't carry a bottle of sanitizer, or if we all don't vote for Donald Trump, or whatever, if we all don't do this because the whole world's going to burn down and go to hell, we're all being led around by those ideas and these paranoid fantasies that if we all don't do something a certain way, the world's going to burn down and go to hell. Simply not true. People said when Donald Trump got elected there was going to be concentration camps and everyone who was gay or not white or this or that was going to be led into concentration camps and it was going to be just like Hitler. It didn't happen. And if a Democrat gets into the White House in 2020, people are like, oh, it's going to be like the Soviet Union and Nazi Germany. It's not going to happen. So don't be a slave to your paranoid fantasies. And, another thing when it comes to the media is run by intelligence services, by CIA, by PSYOPs. Army PSYOPs has people in all the major news networks. And the thing about the intelligence community is it's run and staffed by paranoid fantasists. That's what they do all day, is they have paranoid fantasies about all these bad things that can happen, and they create contingency plans to deal with, well, what happens if this paranoid fantasy plays out. So don't get led into it, because that's who's creating and selling you the news. And the news is part of the intelligence community, because CIA, NSA, all of them, they work for corporate clients. So, and the media works for corporate clients, just like the government. So, don't become a paranoid fantasist like these people are encouraging you to be. And a big thing too is we got to get out of the blame game, because we've all been raised to blame other people for our problems. And religion, especially, Abrahamic religion, Christianity, Judaism, Islam, especially Christianity and Islam, they've been blaming every bad thing happens, oh, that was Satan. Oh, Satan did it. It's like, oh, a famine happened, someone went bankrupt, there was depression, somebody's an alcoholic, somebody committed a crime, oh, Satan did it. That's how our ancestors who were part of these religions were brainwashed. And, now that a lot of people don't go to church anymore, they're all into academia and science. And so anybody who doesn't agree with the science or the consensus is basically considered Satan, and they get blamed for everything. And, both political parties do this. They blame the other side for everything that's ever went wrong. It's basically a dysfunctional codependent marriage where one person will tell you, my life was wonderful until I met my ex and my in-laws, my whole life went to hell because of them. Didn't happen that way. You had problems, you met someone with problems just like yours, and the pot boiled over. That's all it is. You met your mirror image, and you couldn't stand your mirror image. You couldn't stand dealing with your mirror image. So, and that's what all this politics is. It's just, you get a chance to look in the mirror. So, and that's another thing too, whether it's politics, religion, academia, if your side had their shit together and their program was so good that it was the undisputable truth, there would be no other side, because it would be so convincing. Everyone would be on your side, and there would be no other side. So you have to acknowledge that. So here's a long one. That's all I got. Thanks for tuning in. And I'll get on the ball here with some other videos. I got to get July going. So thanks for tuning in. If you're interested in seeing how these current events affect you specifically, get a Vedic astrology reading from me. I can put your chart next to the charts for this year, for the coming years, and we can use your reading as basically a roadmap. So you can chart a course through this year, through the decade, through your life, and you can play to your strengths. You can hedge against your weaknesses and your challenges, and there can be less. Astrology is a tool for having less bumps and bruises in life, so I highly recommend it. I do rune readings too. Much more general type of reading, but it's the same kind of thing. It tells you, kind of creates a mind map, and it tells you, what in a given moment, what your strengths are, and kind of where you're blocked and where you need improvement. So, thanks for tuning in. I'm Patrick Jagir, the Cosmic Alchemist. My site is thecosmicalchemist.com, and I'll talk to you later. Have a good one.